Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying something you might not hear enough. You are not alone in this. That mountain you're facing, that rejection you're healing from, that chaos you're trying to make sense of, it's not all on you. There are moments in life when we feel like the world is asking us to show up at full strength while we're still trying to gather the pieces of who we are. But in those moments, especially in those moments, something bigger is at work. When God fights your battles, it's not always obvious. It's not thunder and lightning. Sometimes it's the closed door you didn't understand. Sometimes it's the person who walked away when you wanted them to stay. It's the delay that made you doubt yourself. But here's the educational part of that truth. Protection often looks like rejection. Growth often begins in silence and healing. That starts when you stop striving and start surrendering. But don't mistake surrender for giving up. This isn't about lying down in defeat. It's about standing still with purpose. It's about choosing to believe that there's a force that sees the whole battlefield, not just your position in it. See, when you're the one fighting every battle, you get tired, bitter, and sometimes even resentful. But when God steps in, the battle shifts. It's not a matter of if you'll make it through. It's a matter of who you'll be when you do. That's the real victory, not the outcome, but the evolution. So if you're feeling like you've done everything you can and nothing's changing, maybe it's time to stop fighting for something and start aligning with something greater. Because when God fights your battles, you don't just get resolution, you get revelation. You don't just win, you grow, you become. And that version of you, the one who's endured, waited, trusted, that's the strongest version yet. Not because they didn't face the storm, but because they stopped trying to be the storm. They trusted the one who controls it. So breathe, step back, and watch what happens when the fight is no longer yours to carry. You're not fighting alone. Divine timing works differently. That single sentence might seem simple, but it carries a depth most people never pause to unpack. We live in a culture that praises hustle, rewards urgency, and measures progress by milestones that are visible, tangible, and often public. We're conditioned to think that the faster we move, the better we're doing. That if we're not sprinting, we're somehow slipping. So when things slow down or when nothing seems to be shifting, it's easy to feel like we've been abandoned, like we're showing up to a battlefield without backup. But this is where divine timing begins to reveal its quiet power. Divine timing doesn't follow the same schedule as human expectation. It's not based on how hard you've worked, how long you've waited, or even how desperately you've prayed. Divine timing is orchestrated for alignment, not speed. You might think you're ready for the next level in your career, that relationship you crave, or that breakthrough you've been grinding toward. But timing from above asks a different question. Are you aligned? Not just externally with the opportunity, but internally with peace, with clarity, with maturity, with purpose. The truth is, if God gave you everything you wanted the moment you asked for it, chances are you wouldn't be able to hold it. Not because you're unworthy, but because you're still becoming the version of yourself who can sustain that blessing. Think about that for a second. What if the thing you're frustrated about not receiving is actually being protected until you're strong enough, wise enough, and whole enough to carry it without it crushing you? In this process, it might feel like silence, like delay, like you're stuck. But it's not punishment, it's preparation. The silence is strengthening your spirit. The delay is building your endurance. No, you got last week wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Because divine timing isn't about immediate gratification, it's about long-term transformation. And when you're in alignment with that kind of timing, you stop forcing things to happen and start flowing with what's meant to be. You begin to notice something powerful. Doors open with less resistance, conversations have more clarity, and your energy shifts from desperation to discernment. You're no longer chasing, you're choosing. Because when you're aligned, what's for you doesn't need to be fought for in the traditional sense. It gravitates toward you. Not because you're lucky, but because you've been prepared. Now, this doesn't mean you sit on your hands and do nothing. Divine timing requires your participation. You show up. You stay ready. You continue growing. You stay open even when it's hard. You trust that your path isn't broken just because it doesn't look like someone else's. And you remember this: when God is in control of the timing, your only job is to stay in alignment with the process, not the pressure. So no, you're not fighting alone. You've never been. Even in the quietest moments, something is working for you behind the scenes. And when that timing finally reveals itself, when that divine yes arrives, you'll realize every unanswered prayer, every delayed blessing, every lonely season was setting the stage for something that couldn't be rushed. And the beauty of it, you'll not only receive what's meant for you, you'll be the version of yourself who knows exactly how to honor it. Faith doesn't mean passivity, it means purposeful stillness. That's a distinction many people struggle to understand, especially in a world where movement is praised and silence is mistaken for weakness. We're constantly taught that action is everything. That if we're not doing, fixing, chasing, or building something, then we're falling behind. But when it comes to walking in faith, true strength isn't always shown in your ability to act. It's shown in your willingness to wait with intention. Stillness isn't about giving up. It's not about ignoring problems or pretending everything is fine. Purposeful stillness means choosing peace in the presence of uncertainty. It means acknowledging that you don't have all the answers and resisting the urge to force outcomes just because you're uncomfortable with the unknown. That kind of stillness takes more strength than most people realize because it asks you to trust in something bigger than your own understanding. It asks you to sit in the in-between, between the prayer and the answer, between the pain and the healing, between the question and the clarity, and believe that you are still being carried forward even when you can't see it. There's a kind of clarity that only comes when you stop striving and start listening. When you step back from trying to control every detail and allow space for divine guidance to show up in ways you hadn't expected. Faith isn't about being idle. It's about being aligned. It's about knowing when to move and when to be still. It's about praying with boldness, acting with integrity, and resting in the assurance that what's meant for you cannot be taken from you, no matter how quiet or still the season feels. In fact, some of your greatest breakthroughs are waiting in the quiet, because it's in the stillness that you reconnect with yourself. You begin to filter out the noise of everyone else's opinions and finally hear your own intuition. You begin to recognize which battles aren't yours to fight. You begin to understand that peace is not the absence of trouble, it's the presence of trust. And that's why purposeful stillness is a form of strength. It's a decision to pause, not because you're stuck, but because you're surrendered. It's a spiritual posture that says, I don't need to panic. I don't need to prove. I trust that what is mine will find me. That kind of stillness changes how you carry yourself. It gives you discernment instead of desperation, a wisdom instead of worry. It teaches you how to recognize when a door is not opening because it's not your door, and that's protection, not punishment. It's in the still moments that you're prepared for the next season. The waiting sharpens your awareness. The quiet deepens your capacity. And eventually, when it's time to move, you won't be scrambling. You'll be ready. You'll step into that opportunity, that healing, that new beginning, not with fear, but with focus. Not because you chased it, but because you waited well. Faith is not passive. It's powerful. And the stillness it teaches isn't weakness, it's wisdom in its highest form. When you truly believe that God is fighting your battles, you stop trying to force open what He's already said, not yet. You learn to be still, not because you're uncertain, but because you're unshakable. That is faith with purpose. That is strength in stillness. God's preparation is often disguised as delay or discomfort. It's easy to embrace the idea of divine purpose when everything is going right, when prayers are answered quickly, doors open with ease, and life feels aligned with our plans. But what happens when the opposite is true? What happens when we find ourselves in seasons of waiting, wondering, and in what feels like wasting? That's where real faith gets tested. And that's where most people misunderstand the process. Because what we see as delay, God often uses as development. What we interpret as discomfort, heaven is using as refinement. There's a quiet work being done in the background of your waiting. A work that doesn't always show immediate fruit, but builds long-term strength. When God is preparing you for something greater, He often allows circumstances that stretch you beyond what's comfortable. Not to break you, but to build you. Think of the person who wants to be entrusted with leadership, yet hasn't learned patience. Or someone praying for a relationship, but hasn't healed from the last one. These delays aren't denials, they're construction zones. You are being shaped into someone who doesn't just receive the blessing, but can steward it with maturity, gratitude, and wisdom. It's uncomfortable, yes, growth always is. But that discomfort is where you gain perspective. That silence is where you develop discernment. That waiting period is where your character is formed. It's the classroom of preparation. one that can't be skipped if you want lasting change. Because shortcuts may get you to your destination faster, but they rarely leave you strong enough to stay there. The delay, though painful, is where God asks, can you trust me when nothing seems to be happening? Can you still show up with faith, still move in integrity, still love with a full heart, even when you don't see evidence of the promise yet? That's not easy. It takes spiritual maturity to understand that you're not being punished, you're being positioned. There's a difference. Many people quit right before the preparation is complete. They get tired of the discomfort. They confuse temporary pain with permanent stagnation. But the truth is, you're being cultivated, pruned, refined, like gold in fire. You're not being delayed because you're not enough. You're being delayed because what's ahead requires a stronger, wiser, more rooted version of you. And that takes time. God is strategic. He doesn't waste experiences, and he doesn't waste pain. Every moment you thought was wasted was a seed planted. Every setback held a lesson. Every detour was a redirection. And the more you begin to see your delay through the lens of preparation, the more peace you begin to feel in the waiting. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin asking, what is this doing for me? When the time is right, everything will make sense. And you'll look back on this season not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Because the waiting taught you how to trust, the discomfort taught you how to endure, and the preparation made you ready, not just to receive the blessing, but to carry it with humility and strength. So don't despise the delay. Don't curse the discomfort. They're signs that you're being made ready for something bigger. God's preparation is quiet, often unnoticed, but always intentional. When the breakthrough finally comes, you'll realize the real transformation didn't happen when things changed around you. It happened while things were being changed within you. The battle is often internal before it's ever external. We tend to look at life's challenges as things that happen to us, circumstances, people, setbacks, and disappointments that come from the outside. But if you take a closer look, you'll notice something deeper. Most of the battles we face aren't actually about what's happening around us. They're about what's happening within us. Before we can ever confront the outside world with strength and confidence, we have to confront our own doubts, fears, insecurities, and beliefs. Because the greatest enemy to your progress is rarely what you face, it's how you think while facing it. What good is an opportunity if internally you don't believe you're worthy of it? What good is a new beginning if you're still mentally tied to your past? There are people who pray for doors to open, but when they do, they hesitate to walk through because they're still battling the internal voices that say they're not good enough, not ready, not capable. That's why internal battles matter. Because no matter how many things change around you, if you don't address what's happening inside, you'll carry the same emotional weight into every new chapter of your life. This is why faith isn't just about trusting in God's plan externally, it's about letting him heal you internally. Before David ever faced Goliath, he had already fought lions and bears in private. He had already built up resilience, courage, and identity when no one was watching. And that's the lesson. The battle you're fighting in secret is what prepares you for victory in public. The work you're doing in your heart, in your mind, in your spirit, that's where the real transformation begins. Sometimes the internal battles are about letting go of the need to control, the need for validation, the weight of comparison. Sometimes they're about confronting wounds from the past, breaking cycles that have been passed down, or rebuilding your self-worth after it's been chipped away. These aren't easy fights. They don't come with loud applause or quick results, but they are the most important ones you'll ever fight, because when you win inside, everything outside begins to change. And here's the beautiful part. God doesn't leave you to fight those internal battles alone. He doesn't just watch and wait for you to get it together. He walks with you through every part of it, through the sleepless nights, through the silent tears, through the moments when you're smiling on the outside but crumbling on the inside. His strength shows up not when you feel the most capable, but when you finally admit that you can't do it all by yourself. That's when healing begins. That's when transformation takes root. Because when you allow God into your internal battles, you're no longer fighting from weakness. You're fighting from alignment with truth. So if you feel like you're fighting something no one else can see, know that it matters. That process is sacred. It's not weakness, it's preparation. It's courage, and it's necessary. Because when the time comes for you to step into what's next, into the calling, the relationship, The opportunity. You won't be doubting yourself. You'll be ready. Not just because the path is clear, but because you are. Victory doesn't always start with what you conquer. Sometimes it starts with what you face. And when you face yourself with honesty, faith, and surrender, you set the stage for a kind of breakthrough that can't be taken away. So keep fighting, even if it's quiet, even if it's messy, because the most powerful battles are the ones that reshape you from the inside out. When God steps in, the result is not just a win, it's transformation. We often go into battles hoping for a specific outcome. We want resolution, we want justice, we want peace. And while all those things are valid desires, they aren't the whole story when God is involved. Because God doesn't just want to fix what you're going through. He wants to form something in you through it. That means when he steps into a situation, the outcome is always deeper than what you can see on the surface. It's not just about getting what you asked for. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. When we fight our battles in our own strength, the focus is usually on survival, on just making it through. But when God fights for us, the focus shifts from survival to significance. He uses the storm not only to protect us, but to perfect us in ways we didn't even know we needed. You think you're just fighting to save the job, the relationship, the dream. But God is using that fight to strengthen your character, deepen your trust, and stretch your capacity. And the kind of strength that comes from that kind of experience, that's not something anyone can take away from you. It becomes part of your foundation. Transformation happens when the battle changes you from the inside out. Not just your circumstances, but your mindset, your attitude, your faith. You stop being reactive and start becoming refined. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin asking, what is God shaping in me through this? That shift in perspective is the beginning of spiritual maturity. Because real transformation means that even if things don't work out the way you expected, you still walk away with growth, clarity, and a stronger sense of identity. Sometimes God allows battles not to break you, but to rebuild you, stronger, wiser, more compassionate. You might walk into the battle full of fear, but you'll walk out full of wisdom. You might enter questioning your worth and walk out with an unshakable understanding of who you are in Him. That's the kind of change that lasts. That's the kind of victory that doesn't just change your circumstances, but shifts the trajectory of your entire life. You'll find that when God fights your battles, He deals with things you didn't even know were part of the problem. He goes beneath the surface. He addresses the hidden wounds, the broken patterns, the toxic mindsets. Because He doesn't just want to hand you a win. He wants to prepare you to walk in the fullness of your purpose. And sometimes that means the process is longer, the struggle feels deeper, and the outcome looks different than you imagined. But it will always be better. Not easier, but better. More whole, more true, more eternal. And when you come out on the other side, it won't just be about what you overcame. It will be about who you've become because of it. Your story will carry a depth that inspires others. Your scars will become reminders of grace, not pain. And your faith will no longer be based on what God did for you, but on who He proved Himself to be through it all. So don't just look for the win, look for the transformation. Because when God steps in, He's not just interested in your temporary relief. He's invested in your eternal growth. And what He builds in you during the battle will be stronger, richer, and more unshakable than anything you could have built on your own. That's not just victory, that's transformation. Victory is not always loud. It's often quiet, steady, and personal. We're conditioned to associate winning with dramatic moments. We imagine breakthroughs with fanfare, applause, and instant recognition. But when God fights your battles, the victory doesn't always come wrapped in celebration. Sometimes it looks like peace in a place where you used to feel anxiety. Sometimes it's the quiet realization that you're no longer triggered by the same pain. Sometimes it's waking up one day and realizing you're finally free from the weight of what used to hold you down. It's subtle, but it's powerful. And it's real. When God brings victory, it often shows up in the form of internal shifts. That's because the most meaningful victories aren't the ones everyone else can see. They're the ones only you can feel. No one else may know the depths of the storm you just survived, but you know. You know what it took to keep showing up when you wanted to give up. You know the nights you cried in silence and the mornings you put on a brave face. You know how many times you had to choose faith over fear, hope over despair. And when the breakthrough comes, even if the world doesn't notice, you will. That's the beauty of a quiet victory. It's yours. These are the kinds of victories that don't rely on outside validation. They don't need a platform or a crowd. Because God doesn't work for applause, He works for transformation. He works in hidden spaces in the background of your heart, in the parts of you that no one else sees. And when you let Him fight for you, the outcome is often subtle on the outside, but profound on the inside. You begin to carry yourself differently. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain your journey. There's a quiet strength that comes from knowing who's been fighting for you all along. Victory also means restoration. God doesn't just bring you through the battle. He restores what was lost in it. He restores your joy, your clarity, your purpose. And even when He doesn't bring back what you thought you needed, He replaces it with something better, something eternal. That restoration may not be flashy, but it's deeply healing because it reaches into the places that were broken and says, yeah, you're whole again. It's not about everything looking perfect. It's about you feeling free. The truth is, if you're always looking for loud signs that you've won, you might miss the soft ones that matter most. The fact that you're no longer angry like you used to be, that's a win. The fact that you chose peace instead of revenge, that's a win. The fact that you prayed instead of panicked, forgave instead of held a grudge, kept going instead of quitting, that's victory. And it may not make headlines, but it makes healing. It may not be shouted from stages, but it is written in the fabric of your soul. So celebrate the quiet wins, honor the small shifts. Recognize that sometimes the most powerful evidence of God fighting your battles is how you carry peace where there used to be chaos. How you smile with authenticity after seasons of sorrow. How you step into new chapters with calm assurance, even when the path ahead is still unfolding. That's not weakness. That's the kind of victory that only heaven can bring. It's steady, it's sacred, and it's yours.